General Schwarzkopf remarked once he wasn't a bad leader because he made bad decisions. He was a bad leader because he made no decisions. Decision making is arguably the most fundamental leadership skill. According to a 2022 McKinsey study, executives spend approximately 37% of their time making decisions. Yet 60% of executives report that much of that time is used ineffectively. Research from Harvard Business Review found that companies with streamlined decision making processes were 95% more likely to report above average financial performance. Welcome back to Leader Leave, the podcast where we cut straight through to real approaches to improve leadership today. Hi, I'm Dr. Casey, your host of Leader Leave and the founder of Future Point Innovations. In 20 minutes or less, we will discuss decisive leadership, addressing three myths, a practical model that can be applied immediately, and five common questions that leaders ask about decision making. Let's jump in. Myth number one, you need all information before deciding. The truth is, waiting for complete information often costs more than deciding with partial data, and oftentimes it takes way too long to try and get perfect data. A Columbia University study found that having more information often leads to analysis paralysis, meaning that too much information impairs our ability to make a decision. MIT Sloan School of Management shows that in rapidly changing environments, the opportunity cost of delayed decisions frequently exceed the value of additional information by 35 times. That's huge. According to another study in the Administrative Science Quarterly, leaders who wait for complete information miss market opportunities 72% of the time because perfect information is virtually impossible to attain. One of the greatest rules that I found to help with the decision making process is follow former US General Colin Powell. He advocated the 40-70 rule. Make decisions when you have between 40% to 70% of information. Less than 40% is too risky. You don't have enough. More than 70 means you're likely going to wait too long to go to market. The bottom line here, decisive leadership is not about having all the answers or never second guessing decisions. It's about striking a balance between action and adaptability. Leverage the best information you have, foster a culture that values thoughtful flexibility, and by embracing these principles, leaders create pathways for success, reduce strategic errors, and position their teams to thrive even in uncertain circumstances. Myth number two, good leaders never second guess their decisions. The truth is, effective leaders make decisive calls but remain flexible enough to adjust when new information emerges. Stanford University research on growth mindset shows that leaders who are willing to revise decisions when presented with new information outperform those with fixed viewpoints by 22% on leadership effectiveness metrics, meaning that you have the ability to change when new information arises. A longitudinal study of 200 CEOs by NSEED found that the most successful leaders were those who made firm decisions but adjusted course when necessary, demonstrating what researchers called decisive flexibility. Again, new information, we have the ability to revise. Another research from Wharton Business School found that organizations that encourage reasonable decision reconsideration experience 37% fewer significant strategic errors than those with cultures that penalize changing direction. Those that are able to reconsider what's going on, you will have fewer errors and mistakes. It's okay to change direction. It's not okay to have analysis paralysis. Finally, a study of 5,000 executives by the consulting firm Bain & Company found that the most effective leaders change their minds on important decisions about 28% of the time, meaning not too rigid and not too wavering. Finally, decisive leadership is not about rigid adherence in initial decisions or involving excessive members of the team, but rather about striking a solid balance between decisive, adaptability, and focus. By making timely decisions with the best available information, go back to the 40-70 rule, revising when necessary, and fostering a collaborative environment tailored to the overall complexity of the problem, leaders can enhance decision-making quality, reduce unnecessary delays, and position their teams for success even in uncertain circumstances. Going back to myth number one there. Myth 3, involving more people always leads to better decisions. The truth is, collaborative decision making may work for some complex problems, but can create more unnecessary delays for straightforward issues and complex issues. The Princeton University research found that decision quality improved with additional input by up to 56 people, after which each additional person reduced decision quality by approximately 2%. Now, this is for larger organizations. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology documented social loafing. I love this term, social loafing, where individual accountability decreases as group size increases, leading to poorer decisions in unnecessarily large groups. One example of this was Jeff Bezos famously instituted the two pizza rules. He limited meeting sizes to groups that could be fed by two pizzas. That takes a lot of the over collaboration and too many people involved in that decision making down to a finite few that need to be in the room. Research from the University of Minnesota found that when dealing with straightforward decisions, each additional person involved increased decision-making time by 45% while improving decision quality by only 5%. And this is with a straightforward decision. Imagine what happens if you're getting into an overly complex and you keep adding more and more and more people. Be intentional about who is being part of that decision. Ultimately, effective decision making, again, is not about that rigid adherence to rules or involving excessive amount of people. It is striking a balance between decisiveness, adaptability, and collaboration. When, as a leader, we can do this, we enhance that decision making quality by leveraging evidence-based practices, fostering clarity, respecting the dynamics, and by doing so, they create a foundation of thoughtful, timely, and impactful decisions that drive success in any organizational setting. So let's jump in now that we got our 3 myths out the way. Let's jump into this episode's model. This is what I call the 3D decision model. This is a framework with evidence. Define, deadline, and delegate or decide. Number 1, define what exactly needs to be decided. What's in scope, what's out of scope. What's really interesting about this is research from Northwestern University indicates 68% of poor decisions originate from inadequate decision framing in the first place, meaning we're not clearly defining what needs to be decided. By clearly defining what needs to be decided and what doesn't, you eliminate confusion, reduce the decision fatigue. Harvard Business School found that executives who explicitly define decision parameters before deliberating were 3.6 times more likely to make decisions that achieve desirable outcomes. How do we apply this? Take a moment on a decision that needs to be done and create a 1-sentence decision statement and identify 2 or 3 key constraints that must be respected in the decision. Help to identify what's in scope, what's out of scope. Number 2, the deadline. When must this decision be made? Set a non-negotiable timeline. Research from the University of California found that decisions with explicit deadlines were 2.5 times more likely to be made on time compared with those with open-ended timelines. Psychologists demonstrates that setting time boundaries prevents overthinking and activates focus. It's a huge concept here. You have to be able to put a deadline on this. If not, people start to make up their own deadlines and hold them accountable to it. How do we apply this? Use decision time boxing to allocate time proportional to the decision's importance, not its complexity. How important is this decision? Major strategic decisions require days or weeks. Operational decisions, hours or days. Routine decision, minutes or hours. So make that deadline decision time boxing for the importance of it. Number 3, delegate or decide. Who is the best positioned to make this call, you or someone else? Research from Google's Project Oxygen showed that leaders who effectively delegated appropriate decisions experienced 33% higher team productivity and 27% higher team satisfaction. Gallup research indicates that 34% of leaders fail to delegate decisions rights effectively, either holding on to too many or pushing too many down. It's something to really consider here. Are you really in that best position? Are you that subject matter expert that can make that decision? Or do you need to play that support, advice, and coach? That's something you got to figure out. How do we apply this? Use the PI framework. I know I'm giving you a model and a framework in this one. Use the PI framework to determine decisions ownership. Proximity, who's closest to the information. Impact, who will be most affected by the outcome. And expertise, who has the most relevant knowledge. The PI framework: proximity, impact, expertise. That is our framework that you can start using today. Define what exactly needs to be decided, what's in scope, what's out of scope, what the deadline, when must this be decided by. Set that non-negotiable timeline and hold people accountable. Delegate or decide who's the best position to make the call, you or someone else. PI framework: proximity, impact, expertise. Let's jump into the 5 frequently asked questions that I get with decisive leadership. The first one is, how do I know when I have enough information to make a decision? Well, studies from the University of Pennsylvania show diminishing returns in decision quality after gathering approximately 65% of available information. In order to do that, use these indicators. Number one, you can clearly articulate the primary risks of both acting and not acting. What are the positives and negatives of acting now and not acting? Number two, you've consulted with the diverse perspectives. Research shows that this improves decision quality by up to 87%. Number three, you can identify the must-haves versus nice-to-haves. What do you need to have right now to take action? What would be nice to have? Okay? It should be a pretty easy thing, especially if you go back to that first bullet of you can clearly articulate the primary risks. Last one, you can identify the cost of delay of now exceeds the potential value of new information. Meaning that if I keep waiting, am I going to get something more valuable that's going to change the direction of what we need to do? If the likely answer, and you're at 65%, then no, move on. The meta-analysis actually confirms that General Powell's decision-making literature that suggests that 40-70 rule is valid. You need 40% of information to avoid recklessness, but should act before having 70% to avoid missed opportunities, to be able to act quickly. The second question I typically get is, what's the best way to communicate unpopular decisions? In future episodes, we'll get into leadership communication and how we talk with different situations and scenarios. But for this one, under decisive leadership, we look at the organizational behavior research, can identify a couple clear evidence-based practices. Number one, lead with why before what. Research shows this increases acceptance by 73%. Go back to Simon Sinek's golden circle, start with the why. It makes the world a difference. Address the with-ims, the what's in it for me. Studies show that when you personalize that relevance, it increases the buy-in by 65%. Next, acknowledge the downsides transparency. Don't run for the downsides of it. If it's an unpopular decision, if people aren't going to like it, don't run from the downsides. Have the conversation. This is shown to increase trust by 45% according to many workplace studies. Provide an involvement opportunity when appropriate. Research shows that when people are able to shape that implementation details of a decision they didn't make, it decreases resistance by 59%. Get them involved with implementation. Ask them how they would actually get this implemented. And finally, follow the 3-to-1 rule. From positive psychology research, we find that when you can provide 3 times more focus on future opportunity than on past disappointments, you're going to have a better workplace environment with additional trust and less resistance. Number 3, how do I balance speed with getting buy-in from my team? The research from the MIT's Leadership Center reveals that the most effective approach is selective inclusion rather than total consensus. Do not get trapped with total consensus. It tends to delay decision making and it does not help with the overall decision in itself or complete top-down decision making. How do we look at this? Well, for decisions requiring high commitment, involve stakeholders early, but in very focused ways. Don't waste their time, but bring them in for expertise and at key moments. This is shown to increase implementation effectiveness by 68%. Use decision sprints, meaning let's go for 24 hours of focus input gathering rather than trying to draw out a long consultation process. This tends to drag on when you're looking for everybody's input versus saying, hey, in 24 hours, this is what we need to know. Clarify upfront whether you're seeking input, advice, or approval. This helps to reduce stakeholders' frustration by 83%, according to Harvard negotiation research. Let them know what you're actually trying to do up front. This helps people to focus in on the ways that you need to be able to get that buy-in as well as reduce frustration. Finally, research shows that involving people in 20% of the decision-making process can yield 80% of the buy-in benefits that will come from full involvement. I.e., go back up to a couple points, get them involved in key times and focused areas, not complete. The fourth question I typically get is, what if I make a wrong decision? This is something that many leaders struggle with because, sometimes it's embarrassing when we make the wrong decision. But Stanford University research on resilient organization provided a pretty good framework. Number one, recognize that approximately 40% of all leaders' decision will be wrong in some aspect. This is based upon executive self-reporting studies. Like, decisions are going to be wrong. That's okay. Research also shows that the most respected leaders acknowledge mistakes quickly, typically within 12 days, and they're open about it. When institutes start to look at learning reviews and not blaming sessions, psychological safety research shows that this increased organizational learning by 76%. What does this mean? We use learning reviews to look at what happened with that wrong decision, so we can teach everybody in the organization or on that team about how that came to be, instead of blaming somebody about this decision, that decision. Next, studies from behavioral economics prove that sunk cost bias is one of the most dangerous decision traps. People must be willing to change course when evidence suggests you should. Leaders that have a habit of saying, no, this is a decision, this is what I'm doing, this is the way we're going, period, with no flexibility, tend to be a very, very dangerous way, because you are going to get worse statistics on getting people's buy-in, having them come along with that journey with you. Finally, and this is going to be hard for a lot of leaders, create a failure ratio. Innovative research suggests that leaders and organizations should establish an acceptable failure rate. Typically, it's found that it's 30 to 40% of major decisions to encourage that appropriate risk taking. We want people to take risks because that's how we build innovation. Finally, number 5, how can I tell the difference between decisive leadership and reckless impulsivity? Neuroscience has identified a couple key factors to this. Decisive leaders can articulate their decision-making process. Well, I did A, B, C. Impulsive actors cannot. They're like, I went with my gut. Big difference. Decision quality research shows that decisive leaders consider 2 to 3 alternatives before deciding. Impulsive leaders typically only consider one. Studies of executive performance show that decisive leaders build in an appropriate cooling period for emotional decisions. Research suggests about 24 hours for major emotional decisions. Take a breath, get the emotions out of our limbic system back to our frontal cortex into that logical decision making, and let's figure out if this is the right thing to do. According to organizational psychology studies, a decisive leaders seek appropriate counsel before deciding. Impulsive leaders either decide alone or they seek validation rather than input. Be aware if somebody is saying or seeking just validation, saying, hey, I'm right? Versus the, hey, here's what I need to do. What are your thoughts? Huge difference in what that conversation is, and a huge difference in what people are going to walk away with. Finally, research from leadership assessment centers demonstrate that decisive leaders have consistent decision-making patterns. Impulsive leaders show high variability in their approaches. Again, our decisive leaders know what their decision-making process is. They consider multiple alternatives. Indecisive or reckless impulsivity is, I went with my gut, I validating what I think already versus asking for clarity or asking for additional information. All right. This episode's Leader Leave Challenge. The evidence is clear. Indecision is often more damaging than making the wrong decision. So this week, I want you to identify 1 or 2 decisions that you've been postponing. Apply that 3D framework within the next 24 hours. Define what it is, what's in scope, what's out of scope, what's the deadline, that non-negotiable date that it has to be done, and decide if you are in the right place to delegate or decide. And if you're delegating, how are you supporting that? And finally, commit to making the call within 72 hours. Remember, leaders decide, everyone else waits to see what happens. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Dr. Casey, and this is Leader Leave, the podcast that provides actionable advice for stronger leadership today. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes.